Walk Two Moons by Sharon Creech. Chapter 1, A Face at the Window. Gramps says that I am a country girl at heart, and that is true. I have lived most of my 13 years in Bybanks, Kentucky, which is not much more than a caboodle of houses roosting in a green spot alongside the Ohio River. Just over a year ago, my father plucked me up like a weed and took me and all our belongings. No, that is not true. He did not bring the chestnut tree, or the willow, or the maple, or the hayloft, or the swimming hole, or any of those things which belonged to me. And we drove 300 miles straight north and stopped in front of a house in Euclid, Ohio. Where are the trees? I said. This is where we're going to live? No, my father said. This is Margaret's house. The front door of the house opened, and Margaret, the lady with the wild red hair, stood there. I looked up and down the street. The buildings were all jammed together like a row of birdhouses. In front of each one was a tiny square of grass, and in front of that was a long cement sidewalk running alongside the cement road. Where's the barn? I asked. Where's the river? Where's the swimming hole? Oh, Sal, my father said, come along. There's Margaret. He waved to the lady at the door. We have to go back, I said. I forgot something. The lady with the wild red hair opened the door and came out on the porch. In the back of my closet, I said, under the floorboards. I put something there, and I've got to have it. Don't be a goose, he said. Come and see Margaret. I did not want to see Margaret. I stood there looking around, and that's when I saw the face pressed up against an upstairs window next door. It was a girl's round face, and it looked afraid. I didn't know it then, but that face belonged to Phoebe Winterbottom, the girl who had a powerful imagination, who would become my friend, and who would have all those peculiar things happen to her. Not long ago, when I was locked in a car with my grandparents for 6 days, I told them the story of Phoebe. And when I finished telling them, or maybe even as I was telling them, I realized that the story of Phoebe was like the plaster wall in our old house in Bybanks, Kentucky. My father started chipping away at a plaster wall in the living room of our house in Bybanks, shortly after my mother left us one April morning. Our house was an old farmhouse which my parents had been restoring, room by room. Each night, as he waited to hear from my mother, he chipped away at that wall. On the night that we got the bad news that she was not returning, he pounded and pounded on that wall with a chisel and a hammer. At 2 o'clock in the morning, he came up to my room. I was not asleep. He led me downstairs and showed me what he had found. Hidden behind the wall was a brick fireplace. The reason that Phoebe's story reminds me of that plaster wall and the hidden fireplace is that beneath Phoebe's story was another one. It was about me and my own mother. Chapter 2. The Chickabiddy starts the story. It was after all the adventures of Phoebe that my grandparents came up with a plan to drive from Kentucky to Ohio, where they would pick me up, and then the three of us would drive 2,000 miles west to Lewiston, Idaho. This is how I came to be locked in the car with them for nearly a week. It was not a trip that I was eager to go on, but it was one I had to take. Gramps had said, "We'll see the whole ding-dong country." Gramps squeezed my cheeks and said, "This trip will give me a chance to be with my favorite Chickabiddy again. I am, by the way, their only Chickabiddy." My father said that Gram couldn't read maps worth a hill of beans, and that he was grateful that I had agreed to go along and help them find their way. I was only 13, and although I did have a way with maps, it was not really because of that skill that I was going, nor was it to see the whole ding-dong country that Gram and Gramps were going. The real reasons were buried beneath piles and piles of unsaid things. Some of the real reasons were: 1. Gram and Gramps wanted to see Mama, who was resting peacefully in Lewiston, Idaho. 2. Gram and Gramps knew that I wanted to see Mama, but that I was afraid to. 3. Dad wanted to be alone with the red-headed Margaret cadaver. He had already seen Mama, and he had not taken me. Although this wasn't as important, I think Dad did not trust Gram and Gramps to behave themselves along the way unless they had me with them. Dad said that if they tried to go on their own, he would save everyone a lot of time and embarrassment by calling the police and having them arrested before they even left the driveway. It might sound a bit extreme for a man to call the police on his own tottery old parents, But when my grandparents get in a car, trouble just naturally follows them like a filly trailing behind a mare. My grandparents' Hiddle are my father's parents, and they are full up to the tops of their heads with goodness and sweetness, and mixed in with all that goodness and sweetness is a large dash of peculiarity. This combination makes them interesting to know, but you can never predict what they will do or say. Once it was settled that the three of us would go, the journey took on an alarming, expanding need to hurry. That was like a walloping great thundercloud assembling around me. During the week before we left, the sound of the wind was hurry, 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 and at night even the silent darkness whispered, rush, rush, rush. I did not think we would ever leave, and yet I did not want to leave. I did not really expect to survive the trip. But I had decided to go, and I would go, and I had to be there by my mother's birthday. This was extremely important. I believed that if there was any chance of bringing my mother back home, it would happen on her birthday. If I had said this aloud to my father or to my grandparents, they would have said that I might as well try to catch a fish in the air. So I did not say it aloud. But I believed it. Sometimes I am as ornery and stubborn as an old donkey. My father says I lean on broken reeds and will get a face full of swamp mud one day. When at last Gram and Gramps Hiddle and I set out that first day of the trip, I clutched 7 good luck charms and prayed for the first 30 minutes solid. I prayed that we would not be in an accident. I was terrified of cars and buses. And that we would get there by my mother's birthday, 7 days away, and that we would bring her home. Over and over I prayed the same thing. I prayed to trees. This was easier than praying directly to God. There was nearly always a tree nearby. As we pulled onto the Ohio Turnpike, which is the flattest, straightest piece of road in God's whole creation, Gram interrupted my prayers. Salamanca, I should explain right off that my real name is Salamanca Tree Hiddle. Salamanca, my parents thought, was the name of the Indian tribe to which my great-great-grandmother belonged. My parents were mistaken. The name of the tribe was Seneca, or Seneca. But since my parents did not discover their error until after I was born, and they were by then used to my name, it remained Salamanca. My middle name, Tree, comes from your basic tree, a thing of such beauty to my mother that she made it part of my name. She wanted to be more specific and used Sugar Maple Tree, her very favorite because Sugar Maple is part of her own name, but Salamanca Sugar Maple Tree Hiddle sounded a bit much. My mother used to call me Salamanca, but after she left, only my grandparents Hiddle called me Salamanca, when they were not calling me Chickabiddy. To most other people, I was Sal, and to a few boys who thought they were especially amusing, I was Salamander. In the car, as we started our long journey to Lewiston, Idaho, my grandmother Hiddle said, Salamanca, why don't you entertain us? What sort of thing did you have in mind? I hoped they would not expect me to do something thumpingly embarrassing like climb on top of the car and sing a little ditty. You can never tell with my grandparents. But Gramps said, how about a story? Spin us a yarn. I certainly do know heaps of stories, but I've learned most of them from Gramps. Gramps suggested I tell one about my mother. That I could not do. I had just reached the point where I could stop thinking about her every minute of every day. I wasn't ready, or at least I did not think I was ready, to talk about her. Gramps said, well then, what about your friends? You got any tales to tell about them? Instantly, Phoebe Winterbottom came to mind. There was certainly a hog's belly full of things to tell about her. I could tell you an extensively strange story, I warned. Oh, good, Gramps said, delicious. And that is how I happened to suspend my tree prayers and tell them about Phoebe Winterbottom, her disappearing mother, and the lunatic. It is also how I discovered that beneath Phoebe's story was another story.